Day. Joining us now, Senator Brice Wiggins. He represents District 52 on Mississippi's Gulf Coast. That includes Jackson County. Serves as the chair of the Senate Judiciary A Committee. Senator, is that still true? Senator, good to see you.
It is. Can you hear me?
We got you. I thought so. Just want to make sure.
Great.
Just verifying that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was some journey going on there that in your lead-in music. That's great.
Oh yeah. All 3 hours. That's what happens when you're the host of the show. You get to pick the music for the intro to the hours. Oh man. So you guys, you wrapped it up down there at the Capitol. Seems like forever ago, but it hasn't been that long, right? Just a little over a month, I guess, or maybe not quite a month at this point. But two really high-profile pieces of legislation that were signed by the governor, HB 1020 and SB 2343. Both of those measures deal with some changes in the city of Jackson, in Mississippi's capital city. And now it didn't take long for after the governor signed those measures, the NAACP to file a lawsuit claiming that, I guess the basis for the case, the best I can tell, they call it separate and unequal policing. First, your thoughts about these bills. Did you support them? Do you think they were good ideas? Why so? And what do you think about the NAACP's case?
Well, yeah. So in my role as Judiciary A chairman, I had the responsibility, and I certainly took that tremendously to present House Bill 1020 to the Senate. It went through my committee, and significantly about that one is we did a lot of work to change it, to make it better, which is the legislative process. And then the other bill, at one point they were combined together. So I did work on those, and yes, I supported them. I presented the argument to the Senate, and in a nutshell, it was that Jackson needs help. I mean, people are under crime wave there, if you will. People are getting murdered. And at one point during the Senate presentation, I asked the body, remember there's 52 members there, who had been a victim of a crime, to raise their hand, and probably half the Senate raised their hand. And
really, half the Senate has been a victim of a crime. I assume you mean
including the lieutenant governor. Yes,
you're talking about in the city of Jackson, right? A victim of a crime that occurred in the city of Jackson. Of course, the lieutenant governor is a resident of the city of Jackson. That is incredible. Half raised their hand.
Half raised their hand, and I was the camera didn't catch it because it only focuses on the presenter, but the people, I could see it, and everybody in the chamber saw it. Half the members raised their hand. And remember, those are folks who do live in Jackson during the session.
Right.
And some have been multiple victims. And to your astonishment, imagine what's going on with the residents. So legally, yes, it was presented, and legally, it changed when it came to the Senate from the House. And honestly, there were things that were addressed that were criticisms, and understand that's part of the process. But one of the most important things to understand is much of 1020 is provisions that were requested by the Jackson delegation a couple years ago, that were supported by the Jackson delegation, Democrats, black and white, and had been funded, particularly the judges, by the appropriations process through the appropriations bill. And essentially all we did was take that and codify it so that it would be there for the next few years, without, being really going away, because it could go away through the appropriations process. So and that was pointed out on the Senate floor. I would encourage anybody to go look at the debate, particularly in the Senate, which was, I thought, very adult and very appropriate. And you can see what the issues were being brought up. But yes, it's a piece of legislation that was supported by people throughout Jackson, white,
Hmm.
black, Democrat,
Hmm.
Republican, businesses. I will give you another, for instance. I literally, during the bill, walked out of the Capitol and was presented with a petition of residents and business owners around the Fondren area, who asked to be placed into what's called the expanded CCID. These, and you can verify the names. They were black, white, Republican, Democrat, black business owners, white business owners. Fondren, and by the way, I live in Fondren. Well, this year I lived in Fondren during the session,
Hmm.
so it goes all over. And then as far as the lawsuit, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Gerard.
No, it's fine.
I read I've briefly read the lawsuit online. To be honest with you, what it struck me as was they already had it ready before the bill ever passed,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they were looking for, they already had their arguments there. And I will tell you this, that when I read that complaint, um, it was funny how it echoed the arguments that were made on the House and Senate floor. Like, these arguments were already prepared when the bill hadn't even been signed yet. And I can pick
Gotcha.
those things out and I can tell you who made the arguments and what they were making. Now, I will be clear. I don't blame the senators and I don't blame individual House members, because in some ways they're representing the folks that they need to represent. That being said, the NAACP filed this lawsuit, and literally the arguments being made in that lawsuit were made on the House and Senate floors by certain individuals before the bill was ever signed. And so I'll let people decide how they want to see how that weighs out.
Wow. That is amazing. So, where do you think this case goes, and what what's venue for such a case?
Well, okay, so it is filed in the federal courts, which is where you file such things, and what they're alleging is violation of equal protection clause and certain civil rights
Okay.
items, which are usually addressed in federal court,
Okay.
and they're asking for an injunction, which that would put a pause on it all. And so let me stop right there and say this: if the court does an injunction, well, then that means that none of this goes into effect. And that means that the citizens of Jackson, the visitors of Jackson, the children who come to tour Jackson, um, will continue to be subject to the crime that is going on in Jackson. And so that'll
Unbelievable.
pause that. Um, and so the legal side of it, back to the legal side of it, is that they're saying because Jackson is 80% black, they're being disenfranchised from electing their judges. And then in particular, the Capitol Police are like this, and I'm paraphrasing here, this Gestapo that's going on and infiltrating the city, which is all ridiculous on its face. Um, I can tell you, based on black and white Senate, House, citizens of Jackson told me that Jackson PD were not doing the job. That when Capitol Police got funded and got there, that they started handling the crimes and handling the issues. And one of the big issues we were dealing with was 911. Like, literally nobody was answering 911, and JPD handles 911. And so that was an issue that we had to try to get fixed with what we could do with this legislation. And
Mm,
it sounds like we're coming up on a break. I'm happy to go into it some
yeah.
more.
Yeah, we will. We'll catch you on the other side of the break if you can hang around with us. We got Senator Brice Wiggins on the
Sure.
line with us talking about this legislation recently enacted and signed by the governor that would expand the Capitol Complex Improvement District and establish a new judicial district as well. But the NAACP has seen fit to sue over these actions. We're coming right back. Studio, Senator Brice Wiggins from Jackson County is our guest. He's the chair of the Senate Judiciary A Committee. We're talking about these two measures concerning the city of Jackson that just were signed into law by the governor. So please continue, Senator. Sounds like you've got some more color to supply us here, and the folks need to know.
Well, to go back to your question about the legal side of this, it will
Yeah.
be in the federal court in the Northern District. So that means a federal judge will make a ruling, and then they're asking for an injunction, which I talked about that. Then what they're asking for is that the laws be set aside and be ruled unconstitutional and based under the U.S. Constitution and specifically the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Many people may not realize, but under our jurisprudence, that the Bill of Rights were made applicable to the states through the 14th Amendment. And so that's what they're arguing. And if they do that, then, and if the judge rules that way, then I guess Jackson's out of luck at that point because no solutions have been presented by these folks that I know of. And so, that brings up the point about this whole lawsuit in the first place. What's the solution? We came forward and presented this. It's been a couple years, uh, and as I mentioned earlier before the break, that the Jackson delegation, and I respect them for doing it, had asked for assistance from the state to get a handle on this. I mean, uh, Gerard, I distinctly remember a few years ago that there were certain people doing donuts in the middle of I-55.
Oh,
And
yeah. I've seen it.
One of the Jackson legislative senators, to his credit, came up and asked and put forward a bill, a Democrat, by the way, put forward legislation to address that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And so
I've seen it.
we cannot sit by, we cannot sit by and do that. And so the allegation is that this is a violation of civil rights and all. And I want to say this unequivocally: there was and is no racial intent in this legislation. And I say those words in particular because what their lawsuit alleges is it was intentionally done to discriminate against the 80% of the black residents of Jackson. There is nothing further from the truth. I can tell you that I sat there, got the bill, we worked on it, and said, what can we do to make all of Jackson safer within the bounds that we have? And nobody has said, including the governor, that this is going to solve all the problems. But the facts remain that there is a backlog of cases, there is a backlog of criminal investigations. The district attorney who is black and elected by the citizens, asked for help. The district attorney has indicated that uh, they need assistance. The bill itself has literally in it funding and positions for public defenders. This is the only place in the state that is being funded through the state for public defenders. So Jackson is getting that. If it is stopped, then by the injunction, then Jackson won't have that. And I wanted to go back to the district attorney. Um, do I wonder if I need to remind the citizens that the two prior district attorneys, one was sued a whole lot, and it sounds to me like they were kind of ineffective to say the least. I
Yeah.
think District Attorney Owens has been doing a good job. I said that on the Senate floor. And I think he certainly has been trying, and he asked us for help. The public defenders asked us for help, and we gave it. And now you have the NAACP, in my opinion, representing a small fraction of, let's just say, the far left who don't want to see it happen. Now, the governor said it's the defund the police liberals who, based on what I see, that tends to be who wants this lawsuit to go forward. But your
Yeah.
DA who's elected, your public defenders who are appointed, um, they're all being uh, taken out of the equation if this bill was to be held up, and then the citizens are back dealing with the crime.
What about funding, additional funding for the Capitol Complex, Capitol Police, et cetera, since the district's being expanded, and then the court system itself? How does that work?
Yeah, so on the Capitol Police, and then we spent a lot of time trying to get it right, and we've had to kind of build it up properly. And Commissioner Tyndall specifically said, if y'all expand it, I don't have the manpower to properly do what needs to be done to bring public safety to these areas. And
Yeah.
so he also said that for the original CCID. And so he was at 50 officers. Bottom line is, you usually use about $100,000 per officer when you factor in equipment and things like that. So he was at 50. So we raised it to 150 funding. And then
Okay.
on the CCID, that will go up, and that will be phased in. So again, under the bill, it won't take place, the expanded CCID, for at least another year. And that's to allow us to look and see how it's going. That's also to allow Commissioner Tyndall to present to us his budget needs. The idea is in a couple years that it would be around 175 police officers to properly police just the Capitol complex. And understand this, as the governor said, JPD is understaffed. People are not on the job. They're good officers in there, but they need help, and they were not doing the job. But uh, I hate to put this into it, but you only need to look at the garbage situation in Jackson. I mean, at what point do people not say this is a failure of leadership?
Yeah.
And I do think that the state legislature, whose lieutenant governor lives in Jackson, who the governor is from the Jackson area, the speaker is from the Jackson area, you have a big delegation. Um, at what point do you not call it a failure of leadership? And I do think the legislature said enough is enough. We have to do something. It would be a dereliction of our oath to not try to do something. And so the as far as the lawsuit goes, it'll stand on its legal merits. But I think what is important to know is that it says intentional. This was done intentionally. No, what was intentional was to bring safety and order to Jackson, so that our capital city is no longer the murder capital, or has the distinction of being one of the murder capitals of the country.
Senator, obviously you're from Jackson County, from Mississippi's Gulf Coast, and there are just a handful of senators, two or three, that actually represent and cover the city of Jackson. To constituents not from the capital city that would say, I don't really want to see state money spent and allocated to that one municipality, how do you address that? A minute ago, I heard you say not addressing this issue would be an abdication of their obligations as senators. Explain your thoughts there.
Gerard, that's actually a really good question. I appreciate you bringing it up, because you're correct. For everybody outside of Jackson, and I can tell you, I've heard this from my own constituents, why should we spend taxpayer dollars to, quote, bail out Jackson? Why should we do that?
Sure.
And if if those folks from Biloxi, Pascagoula up to South Haven, if that was left to be the case, I think that's where people would want. But Jackson is the capital city. Jackson is where the seat of the state government is. Jackson brings in people from all over the country and the state. And and in terms of the Capitol complex, this is where most of the people come from, or come to rather. And so it is a function of state government. And we spend money in different forms, crime lab, things like that. So using it to help out Jackson is the right thing to do. And I think that's what you saw was it was a lot of people wanting to do the right thing for its citizens and to help them out. And which goes to the point that throughout 1020, and I'll finish with this, throughout 1020, it actually repeals itself. And so this is all a temporary measure for the next 3 years and 3 or 4 years, and then it goes away. So it's not a permanent, if you want to consider it a takeover, it's not permanent.
Appreciate it, Senator. Thanks for joining us.